had a magic wand, or you had the ability to make those decisions, you talked about obviously the stamp duty reform. Is there anything else that you would think about, or that you think would really sort of drive sort of things moving forward, particularly in areas like London and the South and stuff like that?
I think in London, how we do this, don't ask me, but I think we need a better PR campaign for landlords. The vast majority of landlords in London are doing a great job and look after the properties and their tenants are happy, but you don't hear about it. We only hear about the ones where the landlord has a broken window and hasn't gotten to it in a couple of weeks, or there's a bit of condensation and they've haven't gotten in to fix this. So that's the stuff that we hear about. That bit of PR, I think would help landlords feel maybe not as disenfranchised as they possibly do right now. And frankly, we've had 14 years worth of changes, mostly in taxation, but also regulatory, and the vast majority of which have in some way, directly or indirectly, impacted a landlord, impacted how well that investment's performing for them. Rolling back on some of that, certainly not from a compliance, property quality perspective. But if you look now at that tax situation, I think as soon as we started to tax on income rather than profit, and not to say that there wasn't something to be done on that, but that was a real turning point. And we used to do a lot of work on property versus other forms of investment. That was an inflection point whereby when you looked at that Excel, it sort of stopped working. And rolling back on some of that, I think would help. I think we could create a bit more positivity around second and third property ownership. If you look in other parts of Western Europe, particularly, owning a second and a third home is seen as, it's very positive and it's very affluent, and it allows people to live in the city and do their jobs, and at the weekend go to the mountains or the lake and maybe go skiing, or times of the year go to the beach. Here, second home ownership is punished, and the real challenge isn't people owning too many properties. The challenge is we're not building enough of them. So shall we build some more and then create all of those other economies that thrive off the back of a strong housing market? When someone moves house, it unlocks the removals dude, the handyman that's coming in to fix stuff, the new kitchen, the new bathroom, the furniture. There's an awful lot of different economies that get going off the back of that. Why are we making it so difficult? And I know that it's not as easy as all of that, and having worked with house builders for many years and understood uniquely their challenges, but lots of those challenges are solvable. We've got this perception that we've got a lack of land. Drive outside the M25 and tell me there's a lack of land. We've got any amount of it. So I think those are a few things, some of them policy driven. There's definitely some taxation in there. We're going to work out how that's how that's going to be funded. The stamp duty is the mega one, and there's different views on it. My personal view, which I know for a fact is not necessarily shared by everyone at Lomond, is that a sensible switch and a well planned switch of stamp duty liability, moving it effectively to the seller, which would de facto, through probably a bit of price inflation over the first few years, moves to the buyer. The buyer's financing it, paying it over 20, 25 years, an average mortgage. That, to me, feels like a really positive move for the market. Again, implementation-wise, we've got to look at who we would trust to bring that in, because you could get it wrong and have the the opposite impact. But that for me is a big one. It's got to be solved.
Do you think there's other things outside of the stamp duty problem though? Do you think it's an issue with mortgage rates? Do you think people are just worried about it being more and more expensive, which is the reason why they're sort of holding off?
I think if there probably is, but I think that's an education piece that lots of people that are buying properties now and that are upsizing lived through that sort of ultra low rate environment that we had, which wasn't real. We look at how that came about, and quantitative easing off the back of a credit crunch. We had low rates for a very long time, and people thought that was the norm. But go back a bit further, 4, 5, 6, 7% is,
that's where we are now.
It's very reasonable. And I think that that is about the point whereby if you think someone who's renting it's, there's a bit of parity there in what they're paying in rent, and they get to own the property. Now, some people need more than that. It needs to be cheaper. I'm taking on responsibility for all of the maintenance that comes with it. But we still have that strong desire across the country for people to own their own property. I don't think, for me, that is, I'm more positive. If I was nervous, that's a more positive market for me to buy in. If I was buying at a 0.5, 0.75 rate environment, thinking rates can only go one way, am I going to get caught out here at some point? Where you're buying at the moment, I think you'd be reasonably confident that if you can afford it now, next time around, you've got a decent chance that it might be a bit cheaper, or that you've paid off a bit of the mortgage so that your repayments are lower anyway. But we've got a real buying opportunity. Genuinely, I believe that we've got a window at the moment where there are, acute challenges macroeconomically that we'll navigate and get through. But that is what's created an awful lot of uncertainty. And if you can see beyond that, see through it, this is the sort of market that you want to buy in. The alternative is you wait; it will settle down. It's probably not going to be this summer, but maybe towards the end of the year, inflation comes off, rates start to follow it, and what happens then is you might save 150, 200 quid on your mortgage. You're paying 25, 35, 50k more for the property. You've missed it, because guess what? You weren't the only one waiting for rates to come down.